Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the New York Yankees. We are at the 2023 All-Star break, and as it turns out, the amateur draft also. And it's been a good year for the Yankees. Four-game lead on the Boston Red Sox in the American League East right now. So seem well positioned to hopefully get the team back into the playoffs. Hasn't been a completely clean season for the Yankees as far as injuries. Our infield is decimated at this point with shortstop Oswald Peraza, third baseman Josh Donaldson, second baseman DJ LeMahieu, and utility man Oswaldo Cabrera all on the IL right now. Donaldson should be back shortly. He healed up from his injury a little before his IL time. We were very conservative with him, given that he's already fragile and he's in his late 30s. Thinking about our season in general, the perhaps most surprising thing and kind of the coolest thing is that Aaron Judge is having another monster season. He didn't get off to the greatest start possible this year, but you can see now on July 11th, he's got 38 home runs, 77 ribbies, and a 340 batting average. He's hot right now, and he's been the American League Player of the Month in both May and June. So he definitely has a chance at chasing the American League record 62 home runs he set just last season. Be interesting to see what he can do over the last 70 or so games of the season, but certainly at this point he is on pace for another incredible offensive season. And we've needed every bit of that production because besides him not getting a ton of offense from these Yankees, our pitching staff has actually been better than our offense this year, which is a little bit surprising. Hopefully things will get a little bit better when we do get some of those injured players back from the IL. Also definitely thinking at this point about whether there's anything we can do in trade to improve the team as we close in on the trade deadline over the next 3 weeks. Don't have any capacity at all to take on contracts, so we'd have to either get a contract that someone kept the entirety of, or we would need to trade away some bigger salaries than the ones that we are taking on to make it work. I don't think there's a ton of obvious moves for us to make. Not clearly, but we will likely be moving on from Josh Donaldson in the $16 million team option in the off season. And I think that potentially we could move on from Gleyber Torres and his $12 million team option next year. That's an arbitration number, actually, not a team option, but it's getting pretty expensive. And then the last person that we may look to move on from in the offseason is DJ LeMahieu. Would be great if we could get out of the last 3 years of that contract potentially, because we have gotten a good look with the injuries to our infield that we just mentioned. We've got Anthony Volpe up right now. We've got Trey Sweeney up right now. And then obviously Peraza and Cabrera are a couple of other young infielders who hopefully will be back and healthy in the next month or so. So there is definitely an argument to be made to get rid of some older infielders who are making big money and really turn things over to the youth movement in the infield next year. Perhaps use some of the money that will free up to chase after some help for the pitching staff potentially. Maybe add another big bat somewhere. But we should have options this offseason. We did trade away Aaron Hicks before the season started. We had to retain 70% of his contract, but at least we've got that albatross off of the books. And hopefully 2 years from now, we will never say the word Aaron Hicks and his contract in New York again. And we've simmed ahead to our 26th pick in the draft. Three kind of interesting prospects, in my view, and also in our scouts' view in terms of potential. Shortstop Dean Curley, pretty interesting bat. Not all that smart. And quite honestly, he doesn't look like he's going to be an exceptional defensive player. Maybe a third baseman, could definitely play first base. Wouldn't even feel good about him as a corner outfielder. So he looks like he's kind of a first base slash third baseman slash DH to me, but certainly has a potentially interesting bat to consider. Another shortstop, Eric Batanti, 17-year-old. Again, a pretty interesting bat, a less than interesting defensive profile. He definitely profiles as a third baseman. I don't think you'd ever want to play him at short, and you really wouldn't want to play him at second. Also 6'4", so he could certainly play first also. And he does have enough range and arm and error rating that could play him in left field or right field. Wouldn't necessarily feel great about it, especially in right field. But a little bit of versatility there. The only red flag as far as his personality is the low leadership. And that last but not least is someone who's actually a pure third baseman, unlike Curley and Batanti, who likely need to move to third base. And that's Daniel Cuvée. Another player with a pretty interesting potential bat, really nice contact and home run power. A pure third baseman, also could play first, and does have the ratings that you could play him in left field. You could play him in right also, but all three of these guys to me are corner infielders, possibly corner outfielders slash designated hitters. Kind of leaning towards Cuvée here. Doesn't have any red flags in his personality, but also doesn't have any particular strengths in his personality from what we know at this point. But the contact and the home run power both potentially being well above average, along with a pretty decent eye and average avoiding strikeouts is pretty attractive. That gap power would clearly be more interesting if he had a little bit more speed, but he still should be able to leg out a double every once in a while. Taking a look at the potential pitchers, pretty slim pickings at the top of the draft. Francisco Capocci is the most interesting prospect. Like the work ethic and the leadership. Don't love the lack of intelligence. Also don't love the fact that he's only a 3-pitch pitcher, still has to develop a changeup to get to 3 pitches, and it looks like even in a best-case scenario, our scouts think his movement and control are below average, and he's kind of the best of the pickings out there. So I think I'm leaning towards Cuvée. We'll see what our scouting director recommends, and he actually recommends Cuvée, so easy decision for us. He's looking for full slot, so he is a little more expensive than either Batanti or Curley. But as I said, I like that 70, 65, 70 with a plus I. Granted, there's no guarantees that any of these players will reach it. But he's potentially got a little higher floor, or a little higher ceiling, more accurately, than Batanti in the contact and the home run power. They're similar defensively. Batanti a little faster, would prefer to avoid that low leadership in the locker room if at all possible. And then Curley's got the best contact of the bunch, home run power a little less. Don't love the low intelligence there, although he does have more speed. Feel like, these are all very similar players, but we'll go with the one who doesn't have any personality defects in Daniel Cuvée. And here in the second round, the pickings are very slim on the pitcher side, so I think we're probably leaning towards going with another position player. 3 kind of key prospects. Riley Jackson, a catcher. Potentially a pretty interesting bat for a catcher. Not the optimal defense that we're looking for, but certainly has enough of a bat that you could play him at catcher if you had to. Could also potentially play him at first base, although with his 6-foot height and pretty poor range rating, not an ideal situation. Colton Hartman has a great personality, positive traits on everything except he wants to get paid, but looks like he could have an above-average bat with some pretty interesting home run power. Not the greatest defensive outfielder in the world, but competent at a corner outfield slot potentially. And then Tayshawn Walton is who our scout, at least in terms of the star ratings, is most effusive on. Certainly the best defender of those three players that we're talking about. Could play a competent left or right field for us. And a pretty interesting bat. Going to strike out a fair amount, but definitely has pretty good contact and home run power ratings. Signability for him is extremely hard, but he's only looking for slot. And Hartman and Riley Jackson looking for 360 and 800,000. I think I kind of like Tayshawn Walton's profile the best. I love Colton Hartman's personality. See what the scouting director recommends. He recommends going with one of the pitchers. I was not impressed with them, but I'll go over there and show you. Grant Smith is the highest rated pitcher out there. But he's going to need all three of those pitches to develop to be able to be a starter. And the movement on his pitches is just not expected to be particularly good. So as a fly ball pitcher, would certainly hope that as a 17-year-old he's going to add a little velocity, but a fly ball pitcher with well below average movement on his pitches in a best case scenario sounds like a potentially problematic major leaguer to me. So I am going to overrule the scout in this situation. I think I'm leaning towards Tayshawn Walton just because he's a more versatile player. You don't feel bad playing him in a corner outfield spot as opposed to Colton Hartman, where you'd feel bad playing him in right. You could live with him in left. As I said, I really love the personality, but I think that Walton's got a little bit more speed, like the home run power and the contact combination. Kind of similar to the first round pick, quite honestly, in my view, where there were three very similar third basemen available. I feel like it's two pretty similar corner outfielders here. And we are going to go with Tayshawn Walton in the second round. And we had lost our third round pick, but as it turns out, Grant Smith, the pitcher, is still here in the fourth round. And as much as I am concerned about that movement, there's also potential that our coaches could unlock some mechanical things that give him a little more movement on his pitches going forward. He's only looking for slot, so as a fourth rounder, pretty good value. Don't love him as a prospect, but I also don't love Riley Jackson or Christian Rodriguez, a center fielder who has a pretty problematic personality with the low leadership and low work ethic. Just not sure that he's going to reach the potential that we think he might have. So I think we will follow the scout's advice from the second round and his advice here in the fourth round and take a flyer on the young pitcher Grant Smith here in round number 4. And here in the fifth round, the catcher Riley Jackson is still hanging out there. Again, I don't love the catcher ability, but the bat is interesting. And for a fifth round prospect, to get a player who's still got, at least according to our scout, 3.5-star talent, could be an interesting DH. You know, perhaps somebody that you play at DH regularly and can still be a backup catcher for you. I don't love the mediocre defense. Certainly not something I would typically go for in a catcher. But as a fifth round pick with that potential bat and the fact that he can play behind the plate, I think there's pretty interesting value there. So we are going to go ahead. We may not be able to get him signed because of our lack of money. You see, we can't meet his demand right now. We'll offer him slot. And since it's the fifth round, if we are unable to get him signed, we don't free up any more money in the budget. We'll get another fifth rounder next year. So kind of a best case scenario. We'll take a shot at getting pretty good value in the fifth round with Riley Jackson. And if it doesn't work out, we'll get that pick in a do-over in 2024. And there weren't really any other particularly interesting prospects in the last 5 rounds of the draft. So we'll see whether we can round up any of these players. Actually, it was the second round pick that we missed. We picked up Tayshaun Walton in the third. Some of you probably picked that up looking at me, watching. Hopefully we will be able to bring him on board. But right now we've got no budget room, so we may have to look to clear some salary off the books to sign these guys. It was poor planning on my part, wasn't paying close attention. I need to kind of recognize that although I'm not going to be playing the Yankees for 15 seasons here, I still have to be a little bit detail-oriented in the decisions I'm making in the draft here. Even though this playthrough is more about kind of learning the new trade process. So we're in an interesting spot now because I mentioned we're almost certainly going to decline Donaldson's team option, and we could be looking to move on from LeMahieu and Torres in the offseason. And we may not be able to bring Luis Severino back either, although perhaps somewhat surprisingly, he's normal injury proneness after what Sevy has been through over the last 5 seasons or so. I'm shocked that he's listed as having a normal injury proneness, but happy to take it, and it certainly makes him a more competitive player to potentially bring back on the team. But we are in a tough position money-wise, and quite honestly, with the season being half over at this point, I tend to think that, even if we were to take LeMahieu off, his contract that still counts for this year is $6.5–7 million. If we traded him for a minor leaguer making nothing, saved $6.5 million, that puts us a little more than $4 million positive. Doesn't let us improve the team as far as trying to win this year, which is certainly one of our goals. Key goal from ownership, quite honestly, and it still only barely puts us in a situation where we'd be able to bring on Tayshaun Walton. So perhaps I should have thought things through a little more there and gone with the other right fielder instead of Walton. As I said, I wasn't paying close attention. My bad, but it is what it is at this point. And I did just put, for the sake of at least giving ourselves a chance, I did put Josh Donaldson, DJ LeMahieu, and Gleyber Torres all on the trade block. I think I'm also going to throw Sevy on the trade block because he's not interested in signing an extension with us because of conflicts with Aaron Boone. So I think we would have the opportunity in the offseason to offer him a qualifying offer. Yeah, he's got to be. He's been with the Yankees his entire career. He's played just about 7 years in the majors. Although it says he's got no compensation, free agent type. So given that he does not want to re-sign with us, also going to throw him on the block. Again, all of these players I think are going to play pretty critical roles as the Yankees try to win this year. So I'm not necessarily going to just dump them over the side of the ship. But if an interesting offer emerges over the next few weeks that gives us something decent in return and lets us take enough contract off the books with some of those players to potentially make a more strong play for some of our draftees with the cash that they're looking for, I will certainly consider it. And an interesting situation just emerged. You remember, not that long ago, we looked at Luis Severino, and he said he didn't want to re-sign with us because conflicts with Aaron Boone. But now he's come back to us and said that he's interested in a contract extension. And while I think in real life this would be a pretty difficult extension for the Yankees to make, given his injury history, his injury proneness is only normal. And he's been a pretty darn effective this pitcher this year and even last year. 7-3 last year with a 3.18 ERA, 8-3 this year with a 3.28 ERA. I don't know that I want to give him 6 years into his mid-30s at an average of 20.1 million a year, but I certainly will reach out and make an offer to him because I think he can be a pretty useful second or third starter for the Yankees. And we should be freeing up some money with Josh Donaldson coming off the books next year. And then, as I've talked about, the potential to maybe move on from a LeMahieu and or a Torres in the offseason as well. So Sevy was looking for 6 years with a player option in the final season at a little over $20 million a year. We're offering him 6 years with a team option in the final season at about $18.75 million a year. So only about $1.3 million a year less than he was looking for. We'll see what he thinks about that offer. And he's willing to think about it. So a little surprising given that only days ago he was literally telling us he had no interest in playing for Aaron Boone, but think that if we can avoid Severino hitting free agency, that could be a real good thing for the Yankees. And hopefully with Cole, Rodon, and Sevy heading up the rotation for the next several seasons, all lined up with long-term contracts at that point, we'd be in pretty good shape at the top of our rotation, assuming that all of them remain healthy and effective as they approach their mid-30s, which certainly is no guarantee. And we did get Severino signed to that 6-year extension, so that's real positive to see. You can see as we're closing in on the trade deadline, we've got a lot of interest. Well, I don't know if they're interesting, but we've got a lot of trade proposals in front of us from other teams. Look like they're mainly, at least in the case of the first one, looking for minor league talent from us rather than Nicky Lopez could be an interesting infielder. Could definitely give us a defensive upgrade at shortstop, although the bat is just brutal. Oakland A's offering us Didi Gregorius for a reunion. I think at this point he doesn't really give us anything that we can't already find in the infielders that we have. A couple of multiple offers of Didi to come back to the Yankees. Interesting. And as we sit here in late July, a few days before the end of the trade deadline, or before the trade deadline, still have a 4-game lead on the Red Sox, even though we haven't been playing particularly well, 4-6 in our last 10, with a couple of losses in a row. They actually somehow have the best record in the American League, half a game better than the Twins right now. The Braves and Phillies over in the National League continue to win at a very high pace, so pretty unlikely that we would have any shot at the best record in baseball. But with 60 games left, we've already gotten 60 victories, so 100-win season would be an upset, but certainly think that this Yankees team can hopefully get well into the 90s in terms of wins and hopefully lock up the AL East. So from that perspective, as much as I would love to open up some money by getting rid of a Donaldson or a LeMahieu or a Torres, they're all critical components of what we're trying to do with the team this year, which is win. So I think we're going to end up just getting duplicate draft picks next year for the players that we're unable to sign. Not the worst potential outcome. Obviously wish we could have gotten some of those guys locked up, but importantly, we did get our first round draft pick locked up, and he's already down in the minors for us. So the player that we are most interested in and we're most interested in coming out of the draft is already in rookie ball. And since we were just talking about him, check in quickly on Daniel Cuvée, the first round draft choice, and played 5 games, 4 for his first 19 with a double and a home run. So hitting .211, has struck out 6 times. obviously very early in the development of the 18-year-old and his potential career in the majors, but we are forced starting him at third base to ensure that he gets the playing time, since we've got a larger roster on our rookie league team than is optimal right now. I want to make sure that the top prospects get the playing time and everyone else can fight for the scraps. And coming out of this year, when we've kind of got everyone on the team fully scouted in a better sense of who they are, we'll probably make some cuts to get the roster down to a more reasonable level. Right now, you can see we've still got 41 players on the FCL team after the draft. And we made it to the trade deadline. The Yankees are 63-42, won 3 in a row. So taking a look at the standings, we are now up 7 on the Red Sox, who are going in the other direction. Still have the best record in the AL at this point by a game over both the White Sox and the Twins, who are in a heated battle there in the AL Central. So as much as I'd love to get some money off of the books, I just don't think it's the right move. The guys who would be getting off the books are players who are, I wouldn't say critical, but important to our chances this year. Donaldson, LeMahieu, and Torres are all starters right now at third base, second base, and most often designated hitter in the case of Torres. So don't see any reason to weaken a team that has a chance to hopefully win the AL East and then make a good run at maybe a pennant and or a World Series. So if there's someone interesting on the trade block that we can pick up, certainly would look to make a trade. Thus far, we have gotten a number of offers from people willing to retain 100% of the salaries of the players they're sending our way. But in the case of players like Ahmed Rosario or pitchers that we've been offered like Carlos Estevez, just don't see any of the players that we've been offered as real difference makers. And looking at the batters available on the trade block, it does look like the Angels are preparing for life in a post-Shohei era. So we can make a play for him. I can't imagine we're going to offer them enough. I'm sure they're looking for a king's ransom, even for just him to be a 2-month rental. And taking a look at the pitchers, he certainly stands out also. Kind of interesting to see Frankie Montas, who we did trade away to Tampa Bay. He is back, and they put him on the trade block. Interesting. Pitched 1 game for them. I guess they are... haven't seen where they are in the standings. They're 12.5 back, and they are 4.5 out of the wild card with a bunch of teams to jump over to get there. So probably is actually a pretty decent recommendation. And now that we have Severino signed to an extension, we are going to take him off of the trade block. Does not make sense to trade him away or even think about entertaining offers after we just signed him to that extension and think he's going to be a critical part of our rotation for hopefully the next several seasons. And we're experiencing the new trade deadline simulation where you've got a bunch of 4 steps of deadlines during the day that are timed as you try to make trades. See, my trading reputation is actually a little bit below average at this point, which I don't love. I'm not sure exactly why it's gone there, because it was above average. Guessing maybe it's because I didn't respond to some of these offers. I don't know, maybe usually I just kind of ignore the offers that come out to me, but I haven't done anything else that should have that I can think of. I haven't looked at anything for a trade, and I was kind of above the bar in terms of my... Oh, I guess I moved us on to the next trade deadline, unfortunately. That was poorly played by me. Anyhow, Yeah, I was a little bit above the bar the last time I looked at it was just a couple weeks ago in game time, and I haven't made a trade since then. All I've done is ignore offers from other teams. So interesting. Have to figure out the dynamics of how that works. But we are going to make an offer for Otani. I cannot imagine that Everson Pereira is going to get it done. And of course, we will need the Angels to retain every penny of Otani's contract. Yeah, they probably will think the offer is an insult. No doubt about that. We'll add in a couple other middling prospects, but I'm sure they will not go for it. Nice injured catcher in A-ball, Engelth Urena. I'd feel insulted if I were them. Yeah, we probably don't want to insult them because that'll just damage our trading reputation further. Angel Benitez coming off of Tommy John surgery. How's this package of injured prospects feel to you guys out in Los Angeles? Andres Chaparro in AAA for us this year. Has a little bit of power, but not a particularly great prospect at 24 years old. Put him as well. Yeah, I doubt the trade will happen too, but I'm really just kind of playing along, trying to learn about how the new trade engine works, especially when I am on the hardest trade settings and hard trade mode. So we'll go ahead and submit that offer to the Angels. Yes, we did get a reaction right away, and he would never accept that deal. So not surprising that that is his reaction, and I don't really know that there's going to be anything else that we can do this trade deadline. Tanner Scott will go ahead and will officially reject those deals coming into us. All of the ones that we haven't before. I don't know if the fact that we hadn't responded to them potentially had an impact on our reputation. But I don't want to. I guess they must have already traded him away. I guess they, again, I generally just always ignore trade offers that I have no interest in rather than rejecting them outright. But maybe the lack of response that I've been giving to people has impacted my reputation. So I'll move on to the next step. I don't think we're going to be doing anything and our trading reputation still just hanging out there. So if anything emerges, I will let you know, obviously. Hector Neris, a decent bullpen arm, but a pretty generic right-handed bullpen arm, making $8 million with an $8.5 option next year. Would take LeMahieu off our books, but we also have to give up a decent minor league prospect in Spencer Jones, and they're not taking on or not keeping any of Neris's contract, so that does not seem particularly interesting to me either. So we'll go ahead and reject that. Move on to the last step in deadline day. Doesn't look like we've got any prospect of really doing anything, but we've also got one of the best teams in baseball right now, so I don't think we need to make any extreme moves. Would have been obviously a huge win to bring on Otani, but it was not to be. And with the team playing better as of late, fan interest pretty high. We did just bump up the ticket prices $1 to $36. I can see our revenue per game is still expected to be down this year, which is not ideal. That said, we are projected to make a decent profit this year, probably driven by those 3 contracts that we did take off the books. Those certainly helped us, but we did put most of that money back into scouting and player development, so not really sure, because player expenses are right as budgeted. looks like total ticket revenue is coming in well above budget. So we did make some changes when we lowered the prices a few months ago that have resulted in a lot more fans coming to the game. And although revenue is still down from last year, it's not down as materially as it was. So I think that that is the change in the financial model that does have us set up to at least make a decent profit for the Steinbrenners this season. And we kind of got a somewhat interesting offer in the final moments of trade deadline day here, the final section. The Tigers offered to send us minor leaguer Trey Wintgenter, but more importantly, $3.8 million in cash, which would get us positive and allow us to sign at least one of the two draftees that we don't have the money to sign right now. But they're looking for Austin Wells, who's a decent outfield prospect. Could certainly see him being a fourth or fifth outfielder for the Yankees over the coming years. Hitting .274 with 27 homers in Scranton right now. Just don't think it makes sense to basically trade him away for a little cash so we could potentially sign... and obviously we're not going to do it anyways. I meant to click on negotiate with draftees just so we could sign the 5th round draft choice Riley Jackson. So trade deadline is over. No moves for the Yankees. Did not really expect that we were going to do something there. And it's on to the month of August. And a nice award here for the month of July for the top prospect in our system, Anthony Volpe, in the majors, playing shortstop and second base, .279 with 6 home runs and 13 ribbies. So you can see, obviously, the majority of his production happened in the month of July since he only came up in late June, but definitely seems to be holding his own at the major league level at this point, which is nice to see. And thinking about some of those other young infielders, Oswaldo Cabrera and Oswald Peraza, both look like they're a week or two away. We'll definitely have some decisions to make with the roster. Certainly Volpe going down to Scranton would have been an option, but he's handled himself pretty well at the major league level. So when Cabrera and Peraza are back, there are other options for us to clear spaces. Certainly would think that the likes of JT Riddle, who was a minor league free agent signing this year, and Luis Rengifo, who we picked up in the trade where we dumped IKF in his contract, could both have their roster spots in jeopardy when we need to bring both of those players back if we decide not to send Volpe back down to AAA. And Oswaldo Cabrera is now ready to come back, and I think we are going to waive in DFA Luis Rengifo. I don't think we can just put him on AAA. Maybe someone will pick him up, take that salary off of our books, but otherwise we are going to move him down to AAA to get Cabrera back on the roster, and then we'll have another difficult decision in about a week, hopefully, when Peraza is ready to come back as well. And we've made it to mid-August. The Yankees not playing quite as well in recent days. The lead over the Red Sox is down to 3 as they've made 4 games up on us in the last 10. We're 3-7. They are 7-3. So things are certainly getting tighter. The White Sox have a 1.5 game lead on us at this point for the best record in the American League. So August has definitely been a struggle for the Yankees. Taking a look at the team statistics, we're now 9th in the AL in runs scored, although we continue to lead the league in home runs. But after a nice month of July, we're only 4-8 in August. Runs allowed, still 4th in the American League, and our starters' ERA is 2nd, so the pitching is doing the job. The hitting is just not holding up its end of the bargain. We'll check in. It's been about a month since we saw where Aaron Judge was in his quest for 62. He's definitely slowed down. 45 home runs, 94 ribbies, and a .329 average. So still an absolutely incredible season. but he's less than 75% of the way there. With a 68-50 record. That means we played 118 games. So we're still less than 75% of the schedule, too. So he's kind of right there to maybe get to 61, 62 homers on the pace. But it has definitely slowed down over the last month or so. And some double good news today. Oswald Peraza and Luis Gil both ready to come back. Gil, who's basically missed the entire year at this point, certainly going to go on a rehab assignment to the minors. And honestly, Peraza's been gone enough that we're going to put him on a rehab assignment for a few days also. Maybe shake the rust off a little bit, ensure that he's fully healthy after missing about a month and a half. And also delay the decision that we're going to need to make with the roster for another day or so. Taking a look at what we've gotten out of Anthony Volpe, batting average has dipped down to 262, 7 homers and 130 at-bats. Certainly has proven to be more than competent as a major league player. I do like JT Riddle's glove at shortstop a little better than his, but and Riddle's actually hit 293 and 41 at-bats as well. I don't think he's going to continue to hit at that kind of pace. Also one of the lefty-hitting middle infielders, which can be a little bit of a novelty to have in the lineup potentially. But Peraza probably needs to take over as starting shortstop when he's healthy in a few days after he shakes the rust off. And that would likely mean that if we keep Volpe up, we would push him to second base. And that means then that we are in a battle with LeMahieu and Gleyber Torres for DH at that point. And one of those veteran bats is likely out of the lineup, which is a difficult decision. So it's good that we're getting healthy and we've got a lot of talent, but it is going to be a difficult decision to make, and we are going to punt on that decision for the time being, give it some thought between now and our next episode. If you've got thoughts on what we should do, would love to hear them in the comment section. But Peraza and Gil will both be back shortly. Gil could certainly be a boost to the bullpen. I don't love the poor control. He is out of option years. I guess the only positive thing, though, that it's August 15th, so we could potentially keep him on the rehab assignment for the next 15 days until we get to roster expansion on September 1st, and then move him up to the roster at that point without having to waive and DFA somebody else. So some interesting decisions left to be made for the Yankees as we try to hold off the Red Sox. The lead is 3.5 now as we sit here in the middle of August. We're in good position to hopefully ensure that we're in the playoffs, but clearly the preference is going to be to win the division and hopefully get a first-round bye. And we will see how we do on those fronts and also the roster decisions that we need to make in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.